Hi, my name's Kim and welcome to my process video using 49 and Market Peace and Joy Christmas collection, which is a gorgeous Christmas collection. And if you haven't seen it yet, I have a process video from a fortnight ago also using this collection and also doing a mail layout with it. Today I'm using some photos of my son receiving his surprise iPhone for his Christmas present, and this is Christmas 2020 that I'm scrapbooking here, and I'll show you the process that I use for making a shaker box as well. So you can see here that I have 2 frames from the laser cut sheets that come with the collection packs, and I have placed those 2 frames offset over each other. I've just glued the overlapping bits at this stage to keep them together, and I'm now unfortunately going around and putting foam down, but I forgot to put my acetate down first. So in a second I'm going to peel all that off because I realised that it's very hard to keep sequins in if you don't glue acetate on the front of your shaker box, because they all fall out. So here's where I realise, oops, haven't put my acetate on the front. So I pull off that foam tape and I am now going to glue acetate onto the front. I just use my normal wet glue to glue the acetate onto the frame. And I just use acetate that I have that can be run through a laser photocopier. So I put that on and you can see I'm only creating the shaker pocket in the larger frame, which shows more out from under the photos because the photos cover where the shaker bit of the small frame by itself would be. So the bit that's sticking out to the left, you don't see that because photos overlap it. So therefore what you see is the piece that is under the overlapped sections of the frame. So there's no point extending the shaker into the bit sticking out that's covered by the photos because you're not going to see it anyway. So I'm simply creating the shaker in that front frame section. So now I've put foam tape around that frame. I have the foam tape I'm using is quite thin, so I doubled it over and then cut it into thin strips to use around the edge of the frame so that the foam tape doesn't show. And now I'm filling the shaker pocket with some star sequins, some red glitter, some German glitter glass, and some silver sequins. So there's quite a mix of stuff in this pocket. I'm wondering if I actually filled it a little too much. I actually prefer a shaker pocket that can move around. I know I've seen some where they're very, very full so they don't move at all, but I really do like them to move. Once, as you can see here, I've put the acetate on the back and you can see that it does move around, but I do think maybe it might be a little too full, but it seems to work reasonably well. There was a real mix of items in there, and you can really put any small items in that you want. I made a layout the other day that had little gears in the shaker pocket. I am rather obsessed with shaker pockets at the moment. The other thing I like to do with a shaker pocket is put acetate on the back of the pocket as well so you can see through. Sometimes I don't if it's messy behind the pocket, but as long as it's a nice flat sheet of paper like this is with that pretty star paper, I like to be able to see through the pocket to the paper in the background. So it looks like the sequins are essentially floating over the background in the frame. And so I just used 2 layers of acetate. Now I'm laying the layout back out to check where everything's going to sit on the layout before I start sticking stuff down. I do this to make sure that everything's going to be in the right place and that I'm not going to run out of space when I stick down the major elements. Sometimes if I'm going with a real go-to style of layout for me and I'm very familiar with how it all fits together, I will just start sticking down. But usually I'll lay things out, get a feel for the layout and approximately where things are going to be, make sure I'm happy with the underlying framework of the layout so that the major elements flow. And then when I want to do all the little bits of extra pieces, I add those at the end because they're like the icing on the cake. So as long as the foundation is right, you can make everything else work from there. I'm also creating a cluster up at the top there, which has some of the die cuts. It had the ephemera pieces and the laser cut pieces, and I'm enhancing that little cluster with some distressed music notes from the Rub-On transfers pack. These are all in the Peace and Joy collection. So this paper has some of that music notes on it already in the background, so I'm simply adding to that with more from the Rub-On transfers, and you can see that I'm putting some up the top with that cluster at the top of the page, and then some smaller pieces around the cluster that's fitting at the bottom left-hand corner of the photos. These Rub-On transfers go on amazingly, and I simply rub them on with my thumbnail. I find I don't need any special tool. They peel off so well and they stick down so easily. So once I know where they're going, I simply put them down, rub them with a fingernail, and pull the plastic cover off, and it comes off so easily. So I'm just nestling those in around where the You Are the Cheeriest cluster will appear at the bottom of those photos. And I'm putting those down because elements will overlap them. Easier to do it now than at the end. Just sticking down the cluster at the top. So I would use a mixture of wet glue and foam tape or craft foam to stick down the elements so that I have a bit of dimension. I don't go crazy with my dimension because I don't want my layouts to get too thick because I do keep them in albums. So a lot of this top cluster is actually stuck directly onto the background, and then you'll see that the flower, the little poinsettia flower, which is from the Ephemera pack. I've also added that little red shiny heart, which is in the Wishing Bubbles and Trinkets pack. So now I'm going to prepare my photos. I am using an emery file, and I use the edge of a cutting board just to sand off the edges of my photos, just so that they've got a very fine white edge around the photos. It just helps them to stand out because it's a layout about my teenage son. I like using the emery board because it's a little bit rougher edge, a little bit more texture. So I've done those, and now I'm just gluing down my shaker box. So just putting some wet glue around the bottom of the frame to glue that down, and also gluing down the overlapping frame so that it's now permanently attached to that underframe. And I'm going to start putting my photos down. The far left photo has foam tape under it, and then the middle photo has a small strip of foam on it because it overlaps up onto the shaker box. And so by putting that small strip of foam onto the left side of that photo, it will sit level with the shaker box. The photo that's on the right doesn't need any foam because it's sitting on top of the shaker box. The title, You Are the Cheeriest, has got foam tape at the bottom because the top part of it is overlapping the photos, which are already sitting up on the foam. The label will simply be glued down flat onto the paper, and that's where I'm going to add my journaling. The poinsettia, the larger of the poinsettia flowers, has one layer of foam tape, or am I going to add two? I'm not 100% sure. So now I've got those photos in place, just using wet glue to stick them down exactly where I had them, and use wet glue to stick down that title and the label, making sure things are straight. I love my T-square ruler for making sure things are straight on my layout. Some things I like tilted, but other things I want to be straight, and I really want them to be straight. So sticking the flower down, and the leaves are just being stuck directly to the page with wet glue, just holding that there to make sure it grabs. And this is a very cute little bow from the laser cut pack in the collection pack, and I simply just stick that down across the corners of the frames of the shaker pocket. So it's all falling into place quite quickly now. I'm adding a couple of little tabs up at the top, and I'll put a little bit of journaling on those. The year, I'm going to stamp the year on one of them and write the location. I don't need to put the day because it's obviously Christmas morning, so we know what date that is. I'm just going to stamp the year on there. And now I am adding the very lovely banner that I love the shape of this, the flow that it gives, and that's the same as that ribbon. It's a very soft movement on the page, which I really like. So that banner is down there now, and just sticking some of those wishing bubbles down, a little word to add to the cluster down there, and that is coming together very well. And I've decided I'm going to add some more rub-ons on. The star rub-ons that come in this range are just gorgeous. My last layout featured a lot of those stars, so if you haven't looked at that yet, I do encourage you to go back and see how I've used the rub-on transfers, because they are the main element of that page. So the little stars are tiny little stars, and I'm just using the dark green ones from the pack, rubbing them on with my fingernail and putting clusters down beside the poinsettia, up near the cluster in the top right corner. So as I said, just the dark green. And then I'm going to add a few also underneath the twisting banner between that and the bow. I'm going to add some more of those dark green ones. And they really are a lovely element, which you'll be able to see a lot more clearer when you see the still photos at the end of this process video. So I'm just going to stamp the date on now. I'm just using a bit of dark blue ink to go with the layout, and I'm not 100% sure if that's right, so I'm just checking. Yes, it is. Add that up there. And now I'm going to add my journaling. So I'm just putting the location on the tab, great place to put it, and writing a few words about how surprised Benson was when he received his new iPhone for Christmas. He had been bugging us for ages about one and we had told him no, and then he had it hidden in the bottom of a box of other presents. So he was very thrilled and excited when he got that. I'm just adding a few more of the little enamel dots that are in the wishing bubbles and trinkets, putting some up near the cluster at the top, and then 2 lots near where the star rub-ons are at the bottom cluster. And here's some still photos. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you checking out my process video, and I look forward to joining you again soon with another 49er market layout.